The Save Dialog Control. Save File Dialog Control does not actually save your file. It merely provides a dialog box to allow the user to locate where the file should be saved and to provide a name for the file. Let's work with an example. Let's use the same Open Dialog Control program that we used in the previous lesson. Drag another button control from the toolbox and drop it beneath the Open button, and set the name to btn save. Set anchor to top right. Set location to 35043, and set text to save. Drag and drop a Save File Dialog Control to the form. The control will be added to the bottom of the workspace in the IDE. Double-click the Save button and paste this code in its click event. Right-click in the blank space inside the try block statement right before the catch block statement, and choose Insert Snippet from the context menu. In the drop-down menu that appears, double-click Fundamentals, Collections, Data Types, File System, Math, and then in the new list, double-click File System, Processing Drives, Folders, and Files. And then finally, scroll down the list and double-click Write Text to a File. Your code should look something like this, and notice that the file name is highlighted, as is the text string text, indicating that this code needs to be changed. Modify the code in the try block, such as this. At this point, you're ready to test this code, so run your project. Start with a simple test by opening an existing text file. Type some text into the text box on the form, and then click the Save button. The Save dialog box will be displayed. Enter a new file name, but do not put a file extension on it. Then, click the Save button, and the file will be saved. To verify this, click the Open button on the form to invoke the Open File dialog box, and you will see your new file. To test the overwrite prompt property of the Save File Dialog Control, enter some more text into the text box on the form, and then click the Save button. In the Save File dialog box, choose an existing file name, and then click the Save button. You'll be prompted to confirm replacement of the existing file. If you choose Yes, the dialog box will return a dialog result of OK, and the code inside your if and if statement will be executed. If you choose No, you'll be returned to the Save File dialog box so that you can enter another file name. Now let's explore how this works. Before displaying the Save File dialog box, we need to set some properties to customize the dialog box to our application. The first property that we set is the default ext property. This property automatically sets the file extension if one has not been specified. The file name property is set to the same path and file name as was returned from the Open File dialog. This allows us to open a file, edit it, and then display the same file name when we show the Save File dialog box. The next two properties are the same as in the Open File Dialog Control. They set the file extension filters to be displayed in the Save As type combo box and set the initial filter. The overwrite prompt property accepts a Boolean value of true or false. When set to true, this property prompts us with a message box dialog box if we choose an existing file name. If we select Yes, the Save File dialog box returns a dialog result of OK. If we select No, we are then returned to the Save File dialog box to choose another file name. The title property sets the caption in the title bar of the Save File dialog box. After setting the properties, we have to show the dialog box. The Show Dialog method of the Save File Dialog Control also returns a dialog result, so we can use the Save File Dialog Control in an if and if statement to test the return value. If the user clicks the Save button in the Save File dialog box, the dialog box returns a dialog result of OK. If the user clicks the Cancel button in the dialog box, the dialog box returns a dialog result of Cancel. This code snippet tests for windows.forms.dialogresult.ok. The first thing that we do here is save the path and file name chosen by the user in your str file name variable. This is done in case the user has chosen a new file name in the dialog box. Then we are modifying the code snippet generated by Visual Studio 2008 by replacing the highlighted text with our variables. First, we are replacing the text with our variable str file name. This line of code reads the contents of your text box and writes it to the file. The false parameter at the end of this line of code indicates whether text should be appended to the file. FontDialog Control. Font dialogs are supported by the FontDialog class, and they allow us to select a font size, face, style, etc. Below is the image of a font dialog. The FontDialog Control is really easy to use. You just have to set some properties, show the dialog box, and then query the properties that you need. Let's work with the FontDialog Control. Let's use the same Open Dialog Control. Add another button from the toolbox and set its properties as below. Set name to BTN font. Set anchor to top and right. And set location to 370/73. Set text to font. Drag and drop a FontDialog Control to the form. Double-click the button control and paste this code in its click event. Now run the application by pressing F5, and once your form has been displayed, click the Font button to display the font dialog box. Choose a new font and color, and then click OK. Add some text into the text box on your form. The text will appear with the new font and color that you have chosen. This same font and color will also be applied to the text that is loaded from a file. To demonstrate this, click the Open button on the form and open a text file. The text from the file is displayed in the same font and color that you chose in the font dialog box. Now let's explore how this works. We know that the font dialog box does not show a color box by default, so we begin by setting the Show Color property of the FontDialog Control to true, so that the color box is displayed. Next, we are displaying the font dialog box. Remember, the dialog result returns a value of OK or cancel, so that we can compare the return value from the FontDialog Control to the windows.forms.dialogresult.ok. If the button that the user clicked was OK, we can execute the code with the if and if statement. We're setting the font property of the text box equal to the font property of the FontDialog Control. This is the font that the user has chosen. Then we are setting the for-color property of the text box equal to the color property of the FontDialog Control, as this will be the color that the user has chosen. After these properties have been changed for the text box, the existing text in the text box is automatically updated to reflect the new font and color. If the text box does not contain any text, any new text that is typed or loaded into the text box will be of the new font and color. The Color Dialog Control. Sometimes you may need to allow the user to customize the colors on their form. This may be the color of the form itself, a control, or of text in a text box. Visual Basic 2008 provides the Color Dialog Control for all such requirements. Once again, the Color Dialog Control can also be used as a class, declared in code without dragging a control onto the form designer. The Color Dialog Control allows the user to choose from 48 basic colors. Let's work with a sample explaining the Color Dialog Control. Let's use the same Open Dialog application. On the form, add another button control from the toolbox and set its properties according to the values mentioned here. Set the name to BTN color. Set anchor to top and right. Set location to 350/103. And set text to color. Drag and drop a Color Dialog Control. Double-click the button control and paste this code in the click event. That's all the code that you'll need to add. Start your project by pressing F5. Once the form is displayed, click the Color button to display the color dialog box. Choose any color that you want, or create a custom color by clicking the Define Custom Colors button. After you've chosen a color, click the OK button in the color dialog box. The background color of the form will be set to the color that you have selected. Let's take a look at how this works. We're using the if and if statement to check the dialog result returned by the showDialog method of this dialog box. If colorDialog1.showDialog equals windows.forms.dialogresult.ok, then within the if statement, we add the code necessary to change the back color property of the form. If the user clicked OK in the color dialog box, the background color of the form is changed with this line of code. Creating a simple Windows application. Visual Studio 2008 comes with a comprehensive set of controls that you can use in your projects. Here in this lesson, we're going to use some of these controls to put together a basic application. The scenario here is to build a basic Windows Forms application that lets the user enter text into a form. The application will count the number of words and letters in the block of text that they enter. Let's start creating, shall we? Create a new Windows application and name it Text Counter. Click on Form 1 in the Forms Designer, and in the Properties window, set the size property to 442/300, the Start Position property to Center Screen, and the Text property to Text Counter. To instruct the user what to do with the form, add a label. Select the Label control from the toolbox, drag it to the top left-hand corner of the form. Use the snap lines to align this control in the upper left hand of the form. Drag a text box control from the toolbox and use the snap lines to align it beneath the label control that you just added. In the Property window, set the name to TXT Words. Set Multiline to True. Set Scroll Bars to Vertical. Set Size to 390/190. To allow the user to select the preferred count method, you use two radio buttons. So draw two radio button controls onto the form next to each other below the text box. Change the properties on the radio button as mentioned here. For the first radio button, set the name to Rad Count Chars. Set Checked to True, and set Text to Chars. For the second radio button, set the name to Rad Count Words, and set Text to Words. In order to pass the result to the user, add two new label controls next to the radio button controls. In the first label control, change its text property to The Results Are. In the second label control, set the name property as LBL Results, label results, and clear the text property. Now that you have the controls laid out on your form the way you want them, you can make sure you keep it that way. Select one of the controls and not the actual form, and then select Format Lock Controls from the menu. This sets the locked property of each of the controls to true, and prevents them from accidentally being moved, resized, or deleted. Arrange all your controls so that the form should look like this. Let's move on to the coding part. Return to the Windows Forms Text Counter project and move your pointer to the Form Load event. Paste this code to count characters. Remember, to insert an XML document comment block, you need to type 3 apostrophes above the function after writing the code. Now, you need to build an event handler for the text box. Select TXT Words in the Class Name combo box. Add the following highlighted code to the event handler. Finally, run the application by pressing F5. Enter some text into the text box, and you'll see a screen like the one shown here. Now, let's examine how this works. Whenever we type a character into a text box, the label at the bottom of the form reports the current number of characters. That's because the text changed event is fired whenever the user changes the text in the box. This happens when the new text is entered, when changes are made to existing text, and when old text is deleted. You are listening for this event, and whenever we hear it, or rather receive it, we call count characters and pass in the block of text from the text box. As the user types text into the text words text box, the text property is updated to reflect the text that has been entered. You can change the value for this property and pass it to count characters. The count characters function, in return, counts the characters and passes back an integer representing the number of characters that it has counted. After getting the number of characters, We update the LBL results control for our Windows form.